Hi, everyone. Do you know, can you guys hear me? Okay. Do you know what terrifies the average adult more than anything else? Technology, right? The fact that I couldn't get the mic to work or my PowerPoint won't work, something like that. I'm really glad to be with you. So we are going to talk about something in your body that's changing every single day. It's in fact changing every single minute. And what is this a picture of? The brain, that's right. So in your body, you have lots of different organs. You have a liver, and you have two beautiful kidneys, and you have a pancreas. And those organs are exactly doing what they're supposed to be doing on the first hour you are born. And they don't really change. They get a little bit bigger as your body grows. But your kidney is doing everything it can to filter out salt and toxins and make sure that your blood level is even. And it doesn't change throughout your lifespan. It gets a little less functional as you get older. That is not true for your brain. There are very few parts of your body that are changing as much as your brain is at this exact stage. So this brain of yours, what I think of as your most important organ in your body, is shifting a huge amount in the next 12 years. So at what age is your brain complete with development? Yes? Yeah, so the answer he just gave was 26. So there's a little spread. In general, I would say most of our brains are done developing between 24 and 25. That's when we're done. But you know what that is? That's when you've gotten all the way through trade school, all the way through college, you're already into grad school. Like, that is a long way off, right? So this is a picture of what our brains look like from early in life, from about 5 years old until about 20. And it's a little hard to see on this slide, but I want you to pause and look at that middle brain, smack dab in the middle. That is the brain of everyone in this room, okay? Your brains at the age of 12, 13, and 14 are in this unbelievable active phase of development. And I want you to pause for a minute, because the brain that's the furthest to the right there, that is a kindergarten brain. And I want you to ask yourself, when you guys were in elementary school, which for some of you was only a year ago, what did those kindergartners, what were they like to you? Could they run really, really fast? Could they sprint down a track? Sometimes they could. Could they ride a bike? Most 5-year-olds can't really ride a bike. Most of them aren't that skilled. Can they have a really complicated discussion or argument? No, much more simple. Can they do basic algebra? No, right? Do they have emotions that mean they just get really angry and cry a lot? Right. So that's normal, right? That's what 5-year-olds are supposed to be doing, right? Think how different you are than a 5-year-old, right? You're bigger and taller and your muscles are stronger, right? But really the biggest difference between you and a kindergartner is your brain. That is what has changed the most. And what is going to happen to you guys in the next 10 to 12 years is one of the most important things. And it has the biggest predictor value for how well your life will go long term. And what some of our job is as adults is to help make sure that you guys are educated enough that you can protect the most critical organ in your body, which is your brain, right? So there are 3 things that happen sitting in this room right now. They happen starting in 6th grade, and they continue all the way through college. The first one is something called synaptic refinement. So this brain here that is beautiful, but it's pretty tangled, right? Lots of different synapses going a million different directions is the brain of everybody in this room, right? That's what your brains now look like, and that's what they're supposed to look like. Your brain in the next 10 to 12 years has got to start looking like this. It has got to start getting very organized, cleaned up, rapid pathways of information being spread. You have tens of billions of these connections in your brain. And there are times during this next 10 years where you will lose 30,000 of these connections a second, because your brain is trying to prune back. It needs to clean up this tangled mess. That's what your brain is supposed to do. It doesn't mean you're losing brain mass or you're becoming less smart. You're actually becoming more smart, more efficient, more able to quickly manage life, right? That's what your brains are supposed to be doing, and it's an extraordinary thing. The second thing that happens during this time is we make pathways in the brain that are insulated or myelinated, and they make decisions faster. You get rid of things that are no longer necessary. You keep the pathways that matter the most. So this is why this is the stage of development where you can have things go awry or things sort of fall off track, and they only fall off track during this age. So these brains of yours, right, are absolutely spectacular and normal, right? I have an 8th grader. I have a 10th grader. I have a kid in college right now. So I have kids who are your age. And sometimes I look at them and think, man, are you frustrating to parent right now, right? Because their brains and your brains are all about pushing the limit, because your brains are trying to figure out what does it need to keep and what does it need to get rid of. You guys are about finding, is there a wall, is there a ceiling, and I am going to push everything I can. Your brains are intended to be act first, think later. That is the way they're supposed to be. There tends to be less than optimal planning. There tends to be a very strong, wide experience of emotion. You guys are a little bit extreme when it comes to being sad or happy. It's just, that's the way it's supposed to be. Your brains tend to have a very strong preference for the physical sensation seeking, right? These 3 kids are jumping off a cliff, right? When you're 37, the likelihood of you wanting to jump off a cliff isn't so high. There's never a time in your life where it matters to you more what your friends think, ever. Because at your age, your entire goal is to find peers. You're trying to find your herd. This happens at this stage of the game, between 12 and 24. Before 12, it matters, but if you have a close friend or you don't, it doesn't matter as much. But at your age, it matters a lot. Your brains, don't let anybody tell you differently. Your brains are amazing, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing right now. And our job, again, is to help you learn enough about your brains that you can make good decisions to protect them long term. So there is this thing in the brain called the reward center of the brain. And this part of the brain gives you this really strong sense of joy or euphoria. It is the part of the brain that says, holy smokes, that was awesome, do it again. Okay? Holy smokes, that was awesome, do it again. And part of that brain is about survival. It says, I need to find food, I need to find water, I need to live another day. And you get a reward in your brain when you do anything that is consistent with getting to live, right? So the chemical that is racing through this reward circuit of the brain is a chemical you guys have heard of called dopamine. Has anybody heard of dopamine before? Right, okay. So dopamine is the chemical in the brain that says, holy smokes, awesome, do it again, right? And it has to do with survival. It has with it associated these 2 behaviors. I'm going to use 2 really big words that you guys are really smart and will know what they are, but one is called compulsion and one is called perseveration. I have to do this thing and I can't stop thinking about this thing. Those are the 2 behaviors associated with dopamine in the brain, and that is what keeps you alive, is you are determined in your head to be able to find food, to be able to find water, to find a mate long term, to create the next generation ahead of you, because your entire purpose on this planet is to be able to stay long enough to have other generations ahead of you. That is what every living creature does on this planet, okay? So I make an argument that some of us are happy-go-lucky golden retrievers of the world, and we have at a baseline high dopamine levels. There are some of us like this, and you guys know who these people are. You know who your friends are that tend to be a little bit happy. You call them when you're feeling down, because they often will tell you something that makes you feel better. There's some of us who just live at a lower dopamine level. You know, we think of ourselves as Eeyores. Do you guys know who Eeyore is in Winnie the Pooh? Right? I never know if your generation really read Winnie the Pooh. Eeyore is that sort of sad donkey character. He's sort of dysthymic. Eeyore doesn't feel good most days, right? Eeyore is all about the gray cloud, no silver lining. What are things you guys know that you would do to make yourself feel good, to bring yourself up when you're feeling down? Yes. You hang out with your friends. She makes connections to other human beings that make her feel good. That is a huge builder of dopamine in the brain. What else do you do? Yes. Okay, so what he does is he says he drinks Mountain Dew because you know that exposure to sugar actually gives you a spike in dopamine. Mountain Dew is the soda that has actually the most caffeine in it. So caffeine is an addictive substance. Sugar is an addictive substance. Both those things will give you a spike in dopamine. Long term, do you think drinking Mountain Dew is good for your health? No, it actually probably isn't, because most of us have too much sugar in our systems anyway. So short term, it seems like a good idea, right? It makes me feel good, but you crash and actually end up landing lower than when you started, right? So long term, not a great solution, but I totally recognize, but that makes, you know what, I am a chocoholic, right? Like I get addicted to chocolate. I too take it, get a dopamine spike, and then I crash. So what else do you guys do? Is there anything you do that, yeah, go ahead. So this answer here is I play video games, right? So sitting down, using your fingers, interacting with a screen is something that gives you a spike in dopamine, right? And can return to normal. Do you guys think that playing video games can be addictive? Yeah. Is it, well, so let me just say, it can be addictive behavior because lots of behaviors can be addictive. If you have controlled use of it and you're doing video gaming an hour or less a day, you're getting all your homework done, you're still playing soccer, you're hanging out with your friends, then you have a balanced approach to video gaming, right? And you're not developing addictive behavior. If you're on your video game 9 hours a day, you're starting not to do well in school, you haven't talked to any of your friends because you're so busy clicking the buttons and staring at a screen, then it's developed into unhealthy behavior. But that is something that does build dopamine. What else? Somebody give me something that you might do after school. Yeah, what do you guys have? What did you were going to say about dopamine builder? What was that? Listen to music. That is a lovely one. Sitting down, listening to music actually makes many of us feel better. So I love that answer, yeah. Awesome, I love that one. Exercise. Exercise of any sort. I don't care whether you're a dancer, you're doing yoga, you're on the field hockey team. That gives you a major spike in dopamine. Over there. Read a book, okay. So I actually think the reading a book answer is one of the best answers that we can have, because that is a quiet activity where you're engaged with a story, where you're building your brain and making yourself smarter. So there's 1,000 answers, because now a lot of hands are in the room. You guys have covered lots, but there's even more ways. So this is just a little graphic I put together of all the ways that we know to make ourselves feel better when we're feeling down. We exercise, we love an animal or a pet. How many of you, when you're feeling down, hang out with your furry creature at home? And it makes most of us feel better, right? That is a really positive thing about having a pet. We read a book, we write in a journal, we do a hobby. That's great. So what I'm just talking about with you all is a healthy way to keep your brain stable, to respond to your brain when it's feeling down, healthy behaviors that give you joy in your life. This is what's called building your dopamine toolbox. Having things that you have on your list that you know make you feel better when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling down. Having a list of 17 things you can turn to really makes a difference in your life. That last picture I have up there is a young person meditating. Does anybody in this room ever meditate? Do you do it in school? Is it part of your curriculum? No? Say it again. So meditating or quieting down your brain, actually being very present in your body in this actual second, can make a very big difference in your overall brain health. And lots of schools actually incorporate meditation into the classroom now. So these are all really positive, protective behaviors for the brain. So I'm going to talk to you a tiny bit about dopamine again in the brain. There's 3 things that will affect the amount of dopamine in the brain. How much dopamine is produced, how many dopamine receptors are on the other side getting the information, and how many little vacuums are sucking dopamine out. This is the problem, is that when you expose your brain to an addictive substance like sugar or caffeine, but more concerning to me, nicotine or marijuana or heroin or pills, you get a massive spike in dopamine before it goes back to normal. And when your brain sees these really huge levels of dopamine, nothing that you would get out of a Mountain Dew, but crazy levels, your brain's response to that is to say something is wrong. There's something wrong with my brain to give me a dopamine level of 1,000. It's not normal, it's not okay. And what your brain does is it does something called downregulate. It turns down the volume and it stops making dopamine. It gets rid of half the receptors. And every day, without that addiction, without that chemical that's addictive to the brain, you wake up in the morning and your new dopamine level or your new ability to feel happiness or joy in your life is cut by half. You're miserable. And the only way you know to feel better is to continue with the addictive substance. That is the concern that we have about exposing your brain while it's developing to any addictive substance, whether it's nicotine, whether it's a vaped product, whether it's marijuana, whether it's using pills. It is your brains that are susceptible or vulnerable to developing addiction. And as you get older, over the age of 25, your likelihood of developing an addiction when you first use a substance goes down to about 1%. 99% of all addiction starts while your brain is developing. Our job as adults is to help protect your brains. We know that during this time of trying to protect your brains, that having any behaviors that leave you feeling like your brain is fragile, whether it's being bullied or being socially isolated or growing up in a household that's traumatic or chaotic or harmful to you, that is bad for the developing brain. And it is no different than protecting your brain from a concussion for us to have a conversation like this. Literally, some of those things I'm showing you on this screen change the anatomy and the biology of your brain. And this is the time, more than any other time, where we need to protect it. So your generation sitting in front of me is making the best decisions about all substances that we have seen in 40 years. You guys are drinking less alcohol. Absolutely, you should clap for yourselves because you're doing a great job. Your generation is drinking less alcohol than we've seen in 40 years. Your generation will eradicate the paper cigarette. The Marlboro Man and Camel cigarettes, your generation will make it go away. Now, there's going to be a giant exception to what I'm about to say on that, because you guys heard my language. I said paper cigarettes, 20 in a box. Your generation will make it disappear, because we have never seen a generation with lower smoking rates. What do you guys think about cigarettes? Right, you guys just said it. They're very, very bad for you. You know, most of the time when I ask that question, what do you think about cigarettes? People your age say they're disgusting, they're nasty, I think they're awful. What kind of diseases do cigarettes cause? Cancer. What else? Throat cancer? Yeah. Yeah. Actually, cigarettes cause every kind of cancer out there. It's the leading cause of heart disease, heart attacks, and strokes. It causes just recurrent sinus infections and bronchitis. It ruins your skin. It makes you very wrinkled. There's nothing positive about tobacco or nicotine that's a health effect. It is all negative. The number one killer in our country is cigarettes, and your generation is going to change that, because your generation has a very high sense that cigarettes are harmful. The problem is that your generation does not have as strong a belief that marijuana is harmful. So tell me what you guys think, positive or negative, about marijuana. In the way back, yeah. So the point that she's making is that there could be some medical benefit to marijuana. It might help some people with medical conditions. What else do people think? So she's saying a complicated thing. She's saying for some people, particularly older people, maybe it helps them medically, calming down anxiety, or maybe helps with sleep. But her point is that while your brain is developing, maybe it's not such a good drug. Any other, yeah, over there, a response on marijuana? Okay. So a similar statement that when you're older, maybe it's not as bad. So just because I don't want us to run out of time and I want us to have time for questions, I'm going to say to you that in general, the kinds of things I might hear from somebody about your age about marijuana, you've covered some of them. It's medicine, it's not addictive is another thing I often hear. It's natural, it's organic, it grows in the ground, it's better than alcohol. I hear that statement all the time, it's better than alcohol. It never has killed anyone, and it's legal. The one thing that I will say is true of the 6 is it's legal in Massachusetts. Recreational marijuana over the age of 21, those stores will become open this summer at this point. So that one is true. The other one is a mixed bag, okay? So let's talk again about brain development, because that's the point of me talking to you guys, is to talk about protecting this most important organ in your body. There's a receptor that gets laid down during this time called dopamine. The final dopamine receptors get laid down in the brain, and that is why all addiction starts while the brain is developing. The way that marijuana works in the brain, because marijuana, the stuff that actually gets you high, the stuff with THC in it, the active cannabinoid in marijuana, actually interacts with a receptor in the brain that helps to make the decision what gets pruned back in the brain. And the problem is that THC is a really damaging drug to what gets pruned back in the brain. It actually affects your brain's decision about what it needs to hold on to and what it needs to get rid of. So what was said by the last 2 students is very true. After the age of 25 or 26, when your brain is fully developed, I actually think marijuana is not a harmful drug to the brain. At least I don't think it's worse than alcohol. I don't think you should drive with it. I don't think you should babysit my kids with it. I don't think you should take care of your own kids with it. I don't think you should operate on my knee or change the lug nuts on my tire. I think it is bad the way alcohol can be bad in too much quantity. But while your brain is developing, marijuana, and specifically the THC that's in marijuana, is a neurotoxic drug. It impacts the good decisions that your brain is making, trying to determine what to hold on to and what to get rid of. The studies that we have on marijuana show at least an 8-point drop in IQ when you start using as a teenager, and we have been following people for 30 years on this. Today's marijuana is much stronger than it used to be, and so the effects, the negative effects, are even more concerning to us. So one of the questions was, is marijuana addictive? And we used to say that the addiction rates with marijuana were quite low. They were 9% or less. But if you start marijuana when you're a teenager, then the addiction rates are 17%, okay? Meaning that if you start using it, 17% of people will get addicted. And the problem is that today, with today's very, very high strength of marijuana, the rates of addiction are between 30 and 50%, which actually makes it a more addictive substance than nicotine. Today's marijuana is more addictive than nicotine. So again, it really wants to hijack your brain, and delaying your use of alcohol, delaying your use of marijuana, and never using a nicotine product is the most important thing you can do to protect your brains. So your generation will make Camel cigarettes disappear, but what's the struggle that your generation is having? Vaping. You guys just said it. E-cigarettes and vaping. We are seeing this huge spike. Do you guys know people, maybe your age, who have vaped? Right, lots of you have. This is common, right? This is, even 4 years ago, the hands would not have gone up like this, okay? So when you look at the data nationwide, about 13% of 8th graders have vaped something in the last month. About 25% of sophomores have vaped something in the last month, and almost 30% of seniors have vaped something in the last month. And when you ask people what they're vaping, and they say to you, I'm vaping cotton candy flavored smoke, right? That's what they say. I'm only vaping a flavor, right? What do you guys think? Do you think people are only vaping a flavor? No, what are they vaping? Right, okay, so let's talk about that. These are the kind of e-juices one could buy, and I just want to reflect on some of the flavors out there, okay? There's cinnamon roll crunch, cinnamon toast munch, chocolate cookie crunch. These are targeting kids. These flavors are not intended for the 40-year-old truck driver stopping smoking. This is a market whose job it is to get as many young people addicted to a substance as possible. No one can deny that. So this month, a study came out that looked at American-made e-juices that said 0 milligrams of nicotine on them. It surveyed 70 of them that said 0 nicotine, right? What percent of them had nicotine in them? 90%. Not quite all, not 100%, but 90% of the products that said 0 nicotine had nicotine in them, right? They're lying to you. They are lying to you. If you bought an organic granola bar, would it be organic? Yes, it would be, because there are people's jobs entirely. They're called organic inspectors. They go from the field to the farm to the manufacturer. They make sure it's organic. So what the heck is wrong with an industry that is lying, trying to addict you and you and you, that gets to say they have 0 nicotine, yet they have as much nicotine as a pack of cigarettes? What is that all about? Yeah, you guys are unbelievably smart. The answer is follow the money, right? This is an unregulated industry. Nobody is checking it. There's no government agency who considers it their job to protect your brains and make sure the stuff doesn't have nicotine. Because you know what's going to happen? Your generation has just taken on big tobacco. That's what you did. But big tobacco wants to make money. And the only way they're going to make money again is to make sure that you guys get addicted. That's their job. And when you've become addicted to nicotine, and then they start regulating this industry, and this industry doesn't exist, people addicted to nicotine will have to turn back to the paper cigarettes, right? This is that backdoor approach to make sure you guys get addicted. And you know what I say? I say your generation's smarter than that, right? Don't believe it. It says 0 nicotine. Don't believe it. It could be equal to the pack of cigarettes. So this is a really upsetting study. I couldn't believe it when I read it. My kids couldn't believe it because they were under the misapprehension that this stuff that said 0 really did have 0 in it. So this product, the Juul cigarettes, they don't even lie. They actually say we have nicotine in it, right? And have you guys ever accidentally or used or seen these Juul cigarettes, right? So they're tiny little USB port looking things. They're like little tiny thumb drives. And every one of them is equal to a pack of cigarettes. Every single one of them has 200 puffs in it. So it's equal to a pack of cigarettes. And your very good school resource officer just showed me the number of things in the month of January that had been confiscated at the high school. And it looked to me like a whole bunch of them were these Juul cigarettes. So these are people addicted to nicotine, right? Which is not the outcome that your generation was supposed to be doing. Because again, your generation is making the best decisions. And we want you to stay on that path. Don't let the people who are trying to make money off of you make money off of you. You need to override them. Because you know what your generation does? You look at what happened in Florida and with the Parkland students. Your generation sometimes is the generation that's going to make the difference. You guys are going to be the ones that look at the adults and say, you're not doing your job. You can't really protect us, so we need to protect ourselves. Part of this is us standing here as adults and saying, we believe that you can make good decisions when given the information. So there's 3 things that will predispose you to addiction. The first one is having a strong genetic history or a strong family history. The second one is exposing your brain while developing. 98 to 99% of all addiction starts while your brain is developing. If you can postpone use until after your brain is done developing, you won't struggle with the disease of addiction. The third one is a history of childhood trauma, which I'm not going to go into detail today. Genetics accounts for 50% of all addiction. If you have a parent or a grandparent who struggles with addiction, you have about a 50% chance of developing addiction yourself. And I think sometimes the adults think I shouldn't tell you that information, but I disagree. I think when kids know what their genetic risk is, they can make better decisions. You don't get to change your genetics. You get what you get, right? You get what you get at birth. But if you can make the decision the right way about the next slide I'm about to tell you, you can almost entirely erase the genetic component. The genetics almost entirely go away if you can make the decision the right way on the next one, which is that All addiction is a developmental pediatric disease. It starts while your brain is developing. So when you talk to somebody who struggles with addiction, which is the work I do every day, I'm a family doctor who takes care of patients. I run a drug and alcohol treatment center. I'm the doctor at the local jail. I'm the doctor at my local school. Every day I take care of people who struggle with addiction. And when I ask them the question, how old were you when you first used cigarette or marijuana or alcohol? How old were you? What do you guys think the average age was? So I heard 15. I'm going to go lower. Yeah, the average age is 12, 13, or 14. The average age of first use was this room right here. This is the average age for people struggling with addiction. It was you guys, right? And my point is, if that generation, this group of people, could have postponed their use, particularly if you have a genetic risk, if you can postpone your use of your first use of alcohol, nicotine, or marijuana until after the age of 22, 23, or 24, you can almost entirely erase the genetics. That's amazing. You never get to erase your genetics on any disease, but with addiction you do. So if you're sitting here thinking about your own family history, right, and you don't need to share it with anybody, but I think it's worth having a conversation with your family about this, right? Like, I am coming back to Gloucester to do a talk that's a little bit bigger, but intended to talk to your parents on this subject. All I'm asking you guys to do is to delay your use as long as possible. Every year that you delay your use, you drop your addiction rates by 8%, year after year after year. So this is the way you guys can protect your brains. If you start drinking at the age of 15, and drinking here is defined as 2 drinks a week, 40% of those 15-year-olds become alcoholics. If you wait until age 21 to start drinking, then only 7% become alcoholics, which is about half the national rates, right? That's about postponing use until your brain is fully developed. So there's 3 things: genetics, a childhood trauma history, and early exposure while your brain is developing. And the only one of those 3 that you guys get to control is when you first expose your brain. And what I want you guys to be able to do is to have a practice sentence in your head, so that when somebody offers you the first opportunity to drink or use marijuana or vape a cigarette, you have a response that falls out of your mouth before you're even aware that you're saying it, that says, you know what, I'm not interested, I'm protecting my brain. I'm not interested, I'm an athlete, I want to stay on track. I want your response to be so fast you didn't even know you said no before you said no, right? And quite honestly, you need to get out of that situation and think a little bit about who you're hanging out with, because they may not be the people who have your best interest at heart. So, concussions. Do you guys know about concussions? Right? Do you guys hear about concussions all the time? If you're an athlete, you've had the concussion talk, right? And the reason they do this with you is they're trying to protect your brain. We know that having an impact head injury as an adolescent has a long-term effect. I am standing here giving you the equivalent of the concussion talk about protecting your brain. I'm not standing here saying that alcohol is going to kill you or marijuana is going to kill you. I am telling you that while your brain is developing, you need to postpone use as long as possible in order to create your brain to be as healthy as possible. We have this extraordinary organ, and in your age, it is doing stuff every second of every day to make itself healthy, and we want it to continue down that path. So I'm going to take a few questions now, if you guys are good with that. What questions do people have? I'm going to repeat questions so everybody can hear them. The question was, if you start using marijuana at the age of 30, how bad is that? So the addiction rates of marijuana at the age of 30 are pretty low. And what you do in the privacy of your own home, as long as you don't impact other people, I don't think it's going to be harmful to you long term. Now, there's some things about marijuana we still don't know, right? We don't know what its long-term impact is on the lungs. And if you're starting to use marijuana at the age of 30, 5 times a day, 8 times a day, and you're getting on the roads driving, you're going to get yourself into big trouble, and it is going to have an impact. But I could say that about alcohol, too. I mean, alcohol is a legal drug in our community. And you know people who have a very healthy relationship to alcohol. They use it infrequently. They use it once a day, but in small quantities, and they never drive with it. They never make a decision that's going to put somebody else in harm's way. So there's a healthy relationship with alcohol, and there's a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. It can go the same way with marijuana. And for most people over the age of 30 using marijuana, its impact is going to be mild. I am not an extremist. You don't hear me saying it's all bad, it's going to kill you. I am telling you to protect your brains while it's developing, but at a certain age, limited use, not putting others at risk would be okay. So let me do another question over here, and then I'm going to go that way. Yes? The question here is there, as an adult, can you use marijuana for medical reasons? So there are medical reasons where marijuana can actually be very helpful. For people who have multiple sclerosis and they don't have control over their muscle movement, it's a helpful medicine. If you can't stop vomiting because you have cancer and you're getting exposed to chemotherapy, it can be a helpful medicine. So there's about 8 medical reasons that we have good evidence showing marijuana can be helpful. And you can be certified in Massachusetts for a medical marijuana card. Question here. So the question here is, when you start using marijuana as an adolescent, what does it do exactly to the brain? So I didn't show this slide deck. I show it in the high school level and beyond, but partly because I was worried about time with you guys. There's a naturally occurring chemical in your brain that you guys have not heard of. It's called Ananda Mead. Ananda Mead is part of the chemical structure that decides what of your tangled mess needs to go and what you need to hold on to, okay? The problem with Ananda Mead is that it is the mirror image of THC, or the psychoactive cannabinoid in marijuana. Your brain is unable to tell them apart. And THC is actually stronger than Ananda Mead. And so it gets in there and it blocks the Ananda Mead from doing its job, trying to make a good decision about what stays and what goes. And instead, it makes a lot of bad decisions. So we think of THC and marijuana as being like a sledgehammer, trying to determine what stays in your brain and what goes, as opposed to a beautiful surgical scalpel, which is much my preference when working with brains like this. The questions over here? Yes? So the question here is, can food help with your emotions while your brain is developing? So that is an unbelievably interesting and sophisticated question. So we talked about some foods that are addictive, right? What are some foods that are addictive? Yeah, fat. Fat, coffee, sugar. There are some like manufactured products that have a lot of chemical. So food can actually make you feel better, right? Every adult in this room and kids will acknowledge that sometimes you eat something and you feel better afterwards. And a lot of us self-comfort with food. So, you know, when it comes to food, everything in moderation is the old line, meaning that you need to eat lots of fruits and vegetables and drink lots of water. And most of us should probably eating and drinking a lot less sugar than we do. We don't think that sugar, which is actually one of the most addictive substances we know, we don't think that that is a beneficial chemical in big quantities. But yes, we can acknowledge that food makes us feel better sometimes, but it can also make us feel worse. I can do a few more questions. Okay, so way over there, yeah. So the question here is, have I ever seen people under the age of 12 who are using any substance, alcohol or vaping? Yes, I have. But you remember who I take care of? I take care of people who are really, really sick. I take care of people who are very advanced with addiction, some of whom have actually started their addictive substance as young as the age of 6 or 7 or 8 years old. Right? And that seems crazy. That seems crazy. But these are people who are growing up in a household often where they're really exposed to a lot of people using substances, and sometimes the substance actually comes from a family member or parent. So yes, I have seen it. You know, we find vape products not as frequently, but we sometimes find them in the elementary schools. Again, someone is telling you guys a big lie that vaping something that has fun smoke that you can do party tricks is all fine and it's not harmful. But their package lies to you, and it is harmful. And you know, the more we're able to spread the information of, look, this is not a good chemical in your body. And remember, that study I showed you was on US-made vape pens. Most vape products, most e-juice is made in China and gets shipped here. And if you think that the packaging is honest coming from China, I actually suspect the nicotine rates in those products are even higher than the ones we're seeing in the United States, right? So there's another question over here, and then we'll go up over this direction. Yeah? So this is a question of age 30, when your brain is fully developed, what would be better to do? That's a hard one for me to answer, to be honest. You know what would be better to do? First of all, you guys told me strategies you had to quiet down stress, anxiety, worry. That list of 17 things in your toolbox that builds your dopamine, those really should be your go-tos. When I'm stressed, when I'm worried, this morning I woke up and I was a little stressed about my talk with you, and I was a little stressed about the weather, and you know what I did? I threw on my sneakers and my shorts and I went to the gym. And for 45 minutes, I worked out on an elliptical trainer and I left that room feeling way better. So at this point, between vaping and marijuana at the age of 30, I'm not sure which one is better. I'd rather you go on a walk with your dog. So there's a question in the way back over there. Yep. Who invented marijuana? Yeah, so there's not one person. Marijuana has been a plant that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And it's been used actually in low levels for a long time. I have no idea who invented it. The marijuana that we had even 30 years ago is very different from the marijuana we see today. Today's product is intentionally more addictive because it's supposed to be, right? Again, if your job is to sell an addictive substance, you've got to make it as addictive as possible. So the stuff that was being used by people 1,000 years ago or even 30 years ago is a totally different chemical than what we currently have. So let me do maybe a couple more questions. Why would they experiment with it? Why would they try? Well, so remember that, one of the things I said about your amazing brains is that your amazing brains want to experience new things. That's what your brain is supposed to be doing right now. It wants to push the limits. It wants lots of different experiences coming. And it's the reason why your brains get more exposed to substances. People are targeting you, but also there's that part of your brain that says, awesome, let me try something new, right? So I think that's one of the reasons people would want to try. They want a new experience. They want to see what it does to them. And you guys knowing the information that we have that it can be harmful while your brain is developing, that is, my hope is that you guys have gotten something out of this talk. My hope is that is the case and that you learned things that are going to help lead you forward down a positive, healthy path. So let me do one more question. Does that seem reasonable? Yes, way over here. Yep. Oh, did you? Yeah, go ahead. How much caffeine is too much caffeine? Okay, so when you're an adult, so I'm not going to I don't know the actual answer for a 12-year-old, but when you're an adult, the amount of caffeine that is considered too much on a daily basis is anything over the equivalent of 5 8-ounce cups a day. Now the problem is an 8-ounce cup is this, right? And when most of us go to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks, we're getting 16 ounces or 24 ounces. That's a lot. So for an adult, there's actually health benefits to caffeine. Is it addictive? It can be addictive for sure, but there can be health benefits of having 3 to 4 to 5 8-ounce cups of coffee a day. At your age, does caffeine stunt your growth? No, that's actually a little bit of an old wives' tale. Can it be a little bit agitating and make you a little bit nervous and give you more energy than you needed? Sure, it can. But yeah, it is very easy if you're drinking one of these drinks that's infused with caffeine and sugar and other things to get too much caffeine. Everything in moderation when it comes to food. Listen, you guys have been a really engaged, interactive, very polite audience. Thank you very much.